G'day guys, welcome back to the channel. My name's Kaitlyn and I'm an American learning to live down under here in beautiful Sydney, Australia. I've been to Australia on a 3-week holiday back in 2019 and I moved here in December of 2021. So I've lived in Australia for over 6 months. I've been a tourist all around Australia. So if you're coming to Australia, I have my 10 tips on how to not be that American when you come over here. So grab a bicky, grab a cuppa, and let's jump right into the video. My first tip is don't tell people what state you're from where they ask where you're from. Most people aren't going to immediately know that you're from the States. I've had a couple people think that I was Canadian. One person thought I was from Northern Ireland, so not everybody is going to guess right away that you're from the States. So if somebody asks where you're from and you say you're from Oklahoma, they're going to give you a weird look. You can't expect everybody outside of the US to know all 50 states or know that the place you're talking about is a state in the US. That's like an Aussie going to America and saying that they're from Parramatta instead of Australia. You're gonna get a few really weird looks if you do this. So if somebody asks where you're from, say you're from the States. Normally they ask, oh, where are you from in the States? Because they know the States is a huge country. But you can't expect Aussies to know the difference between Illinois and Iowa and Idaho. So if an Aussie asks where you're from, say you're from the States, they're probably gonna follow up and ask where you're from in the States. Then say the state or say the city. Like, as an American, I was shocked when I went over to Perth. Somebody asked where in the States I was from and I said Philadelphia. They had no idea what that was. Like, America is such a huge country that you can't expect Aussies to know American geography. And depending on who you're talking to, if you say you're from America, yes, they are going to know that you're an American, that you're from the States. Some people might pull your leg a little bit and give you a hard time and say America is not just one country, but just know that for the most part, if they're saying that to you right off the bat, having just met you, they're being playful about it. They're also not trying to be offensive. My second tip is don't wear American flag gear or college gear over here. You will stick out like a tourist immediately. But one funny thing that I've noticed over here is that American sports team apparel is huge, especially the Sixers, the Lakers, the Raiders, the Yankees. Personally, I think we need way more Philadelphia Eagles stuff over here, but that again, I'm biased. So if you have American sports team apparel, wear it because for some reason that seems to be a very popular trend, especially with like the Gen Z and millennial crowd over here in Australia. But if you're wearing your old college gear, you're going to stick out. It's going to be pretty obvious that you're an American. And obviously if you're wearing American flag gear. From hats to t-shirts to shorts, if you're wearing anything with an American flag, it is going to be very, very obvious that you're an American. And if that's what you want to go for, if that's the look that you want, then by all means, I'm definitely not saying you should never wear these things. Wear what you want, wear what you're comfortable with. But if you don't want to be that American, if you don't want to be the American tourist that really sticks out in a crowd like a sore thumb, maybe avoid wearing anything with the American flag on it when you're in a different country. And my third tip, and this one aggravates me, use your manners when you're over here in Australia. It really bothers me that there's this notion, this stereotype that Americans are loud and obnoxious and rude. If this is your first video from me that you've seen, you can tell I'm pretty soft-spoken and pretty even keel. This is about as loud as my voice actually gets, and not all Americans are loud and obnoxious. And a lot of Americans do have manners. A lot of us were raised with the notion of please and thank you and you're welcome. In Australia, manners are very important over here, so if you're going out somewhere, remember your please and thank yous. It sounds almost childish to say you have to remember the magic word when you're out somewhere, but please and thank you goes a long way over here. If you're going up to the barista and you're just giving your coffee order, you're not saying please or thank you or have a nice day or anything like that, you're going to come across as that American, that stereotypical, obnoxious, rude American. And you might not care. You might shrug your shoulders and say, I don't care what other people think of me. If they want to say I'm rude, they can say I'm rude. That is perfectly fine, that's your call. But this is, again, remember, a video on tips how to not be that American. So I feel like already just shrugging your shoulders and saying I don't care what other people think does kind of make you that American by default. So yeah, when you're coming to Australia, and frankly when you're coming to most other countries, use your manners. Please and thank you goes a long way in Australia. And the fourth one, and obviously don't come at me for this, that's kind of the point of my channel, is comparing cultures, but don't compare everything over here in Australia to what it is in America. Yes, I make videos on it for education, kind of entertainment purposes. But if you're coming over here on a holiday, don't compare everything over here to what it is in the States. If you're walking around saying, oh, it's not like this back home, or this was better in America, you're really missing out on experiencing another country, another culture. So sometimes just putting aside what you know and deep diving into a new area, a new country, is really the best way to soak it all in and really experience everything. You don't want to go back home after 2 or 3 weeks in Australia and think everything I did was kind of compared to America. You want to really be able to embrace a new country and a new culture when you come over here. A lot of Americans think that Australia is already very similar to America, and in a lot of ways it is, but there are so many things that are similar but just a little bit different. So enjoy those differences, embrace them for a few weeks, and don't compare everything to the way it is back home. If you're going to do that, you might as well just stay at home. So this one might get under some American skin, but don't act like you're a world traveler if you come to Australia and some of the only other countries you've been to are Canada or Mexico or the Caribbean islands. Australians are very well traveled for the most part. It's very common to go backpacking for a year or two, to take a gap year before you go to college or uni and travel around the world. I know so many Australians who've gone backpacking around Europe, around South America. So to call yourself a world traveler because you've been to a couple other countries in North America, a lot of Aussies are probably going to roll their eyes when they hear that, because chances are they've been to way more places than you have. And obviously, this doesn't go for every Australian out there. I do know quite a few Australians who've actually never left Australia. So remember, Australians also get a lot more paid vacation time, so a lot of them do take advantage of that and travel overseas. Obviously, the last couple of years we haven't really been doing that, but before the whole pandemic, a lot of Aussies have traveled overseas pretty regularly for holiday. But I think there's this notion and this idea in America that if you've been to one other country outside of the States, you can suddenly call yourself a world traveler, even if that was just a long weekend trip to Toronto. So if you come over here and the only places you've been to are Canada and Jamaica, and you want to call yourself a world traveler over here, go for it, but expect an eye roll when the only other places you've been to are in North America. This one kind of ties into number one a little bit, and I was guilty of this when I came over here. Don't sit there and try to explain US geography to Aussies unless you're asked about it. True, a lot of Aussies have only traveled to some of the main cities in the US if they've even ever been to the US. So a lot of Aussies have probably seen New York, DC, maybe Houston or Dallas, LA, and San Francisco. It's rare to find an Aussie who's been outside of just some of the main cities in the US that are near a huge international airport. But unless they ask and you're trying to explain where your small little hometown in Kansas is from, overall, if they don't ask, they don't care. It's kind of what it comes down to. Aussies generally don't mind a little bit of small talk and chit chat with newcomers. I know a lot of Aussies who are actually really excited to talk to Americans. Surprisingly, not a lot of Americans come to Australia. Or if they do, they never leave the main CBDs in some of the cities. So you'll find some Americans in the tourist spots, but once you go outside of that, you won't find many Americans. So a lot of Aussies are really excited when they meet Americans. They want to talk to them. But if you're trying to explain where you're from without them asking, they're really not going to care. Now this is one I still struggle with over 6 months of being here, and that's not getting offended by really heavy and sometimes typically offensive questions over here. I've asked some Aussies before, what was it like when you traveled overseas? What were questions that other people had for you? And it's lighthearted stuff like, do you ride kangaroos to school? Are drop bears really a thing? Does Vegemite get eaten with a spoon? Like, kind of half joke questions, stuff that's very light. But over here, I regularly get asked questions about school shootings, about gun laws, and I'm getting questions about Roe versus Wade being overturned. These are huge questions, you guys. And I'm getting asked these by people who I've known for 5 minutes, people who I barely know, people whose name I can't remember when they introduced themselves to me 2 minutes ago. So it's not like I'm getting asked this by friends and family who I've known for a really long time. Aussies I barely know ask me these really heavy questions. So either prepare an answer to get out of that quickly, or be prepared to discuss and share your opinion about something that's really heavy, really divisive. Because Aussies are curious, and they're asking this generally from a curious, good-natured standpoint. I don't think most Aussies who've asked me this were trying to start an argument. There's one story that I can get into if you'd like to, but that would be like a whole nother vlog story time thing. But most Aussies aren't trying to start an argument when they bring up these kinds of questions. This is just what they see in the news. This is how they see America. So they want to know an American's opinion, an American's perspective of what it's like going through these major political issues. So if somebody asks, try not to get offended. If you're really uncomfortable, just get out of the conversation, change the topic, do what you need to so that way you feel comfortable. Or hell, tell the Australian that that's not a question that you'd ever really ask somebody in America because it's so big and political. A lot of Aussies just don't really know or fully understand how heavy those kinds of questions are. So my 8th tip for you guys is eat at as many local places as you can and try to avoid the fast food over here. I will save you time. Red Rooster is pretty mediocre. Go to a better fried chicken place. KFC tastes very similar to the KFC at home. Yes, they have like tenders and I think they have nuggets or something like that. It's pretty much the same thing. No need to go to a KFC if you're on limited time over here. Macca's does have a few different items. I would suggest coming over for like one lunch and let that be your fast food experience over here. But overall, try the local food over here. I remember this small little fish and chip shop in Hobart that I absolutely loved. And whenever Mark and I get the chance to go to Tasmania again, we are definitely stopping by there. The calamari was delicious, and I still remember this meal years later. So many local Aussie places are still fairly affordable. Granted, with inflation, things are starting to feel a little bit less affordable wherever you go, even in the grocery store. But so many local places have affordable, really good food. Asian fusion is huge over here. There's so many really good Asian restaurants. I never had Indian food before I came over here, and this local place has amazing butter chicken that I think I've had at least twice a month over the last 3 months. Which is probably one of the reasons I've gained a little bit of weight. But try the local food. Go to Aussie bakeries and have a pie. Go to the cafes and get a caramel slice or a lamington with a flat white. Don't let yourself be robbed of this experience in Australia by going to Starbucks and Macca's and KFC as much as you can. Try the local food. Trust me, there is so much out there. Australia is such a huge foodie country that you're really robbing yourself if you're only going to the places you kind of already know and are familiar with. Ask the locals, plan ahead, look at reviews on Google, whatever you need to do to really get out there and just try some of the local Aussie flavors. Number 9, I'm just going to keep this one short and sweet. If you're not planning on going to at least one beach over here in Australia, don't bother coming over. Even if you're coming over when it's cold and you're not going to go swimming, at least walk around. There are so many wonderful beach walks. Even when it's cold and a little bit windy, bundle up a little bit more and go for a walk, because Australia has some of the most beautiful beaches in the world. So if you're only coming over here to see a couple of the major city spots and you aren't taking advantage by going to at least one beach, even if it's cold over here, you are really missing out on the experience. And this last one is probably the biggest tip out of all of them. I made sure to save the best for last, you guys. Don't go to a pub and ask for a Foster's. Don't go on a tour and ask where you could take pictures of drop bears. Don't start cracking jokes about a baby eating dingoes. And most of all, the one way to not be that American, don't go to a restaurant and ask for a shrimp on the Barbie. So that's it, you guys. 10 tips to not be that American when you come over here to Australia. I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, hit the like and subscribe button down below to join our little Amer-Australian family. I post on Mondays and normally Thursdays about the differences between American and Australian culture and the overall process of learning to live down under. My name's Kaitlyn, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!